You didn't choose your last decision. Something else did. And it happened before you were even aware you were choosing. By the end of this video, you're going to understand the exact moment your brain quietly overrides your own judgment, and more importantly, how to catch it happening in real time before it costs you something you actually care about. Psychologists have spent decades mapping these override moments. There are 7 of them that show up constantly in everyone, regardless of intelligence or effort. And they don't announce themselves, they feel exactly like your own reasoning, which is precisely what makes them so hard to catch. Once you see the first one, you won't be able to unsee the rest. The first one starts before you've even made a decision. It starts with a number. This is called the anchoring effect, and it means the first piece of information you receive becomes the reference point for everything that follows, even when that first number is arbitrary or wrong. Picture this. You're shopping for a jacket and the price tag reads $400, slashed down to $180. That 400 was never a real price, but your brain locked onto it anyway, and now 180 feels like a win instead of what it actually is. A number designed to make you compare against a ghost. Retailers know this. Negotiators know this, which is why the first number in a salary conversation is almost never a neutral opening. It's a stake being planted in your mind before you've even had a chance to think about what you're actually worth. And once you know it too, you'll start noticing the first number in almost every negotiation, every menu, every offer. But the unsettling part is that anchors don't just shape prices. They shape how you judge people, right from the first thing you ever hear about them. The second one might be the most quietly destructive of all, confirmation bias. Once you form a belief about a person, a political stance, even yourself, your brain stops searching for the truth and starts searching for evidence that you were right all along. You're scrolling through your phone after an argument, and instead of looking for what you might have gotten wrong, you find yourself replaying every past moment that proves the other person is the problem. It feels like research. It's actually a search for validation wearing a lab coat. And here's what makes it dangerous. The smarter you are, the better you get at building a convincing case for a belief that was never tested in the first place. But that's still not the version of this bias that should worry you the most. The third bias is one that keeps people trapped in things long after they should have walked away. The sunk cost fallacy. This is the pull to keep investing time, money, or effort into something simply because you've already invested so much, even when every signal says stop. You're 2 hours into a movie you haven't enjoyed since the opening scene, but you stay until the credits because leaving now would mean admitting the first 2 hours were wasted. The same pull keeps people in failing relationships, stalled careers, and bad investments. Not because the situation is working, but because leaving would mean facing the years already poured into it. The math your brain is doing isn't, will this get better? It's, how do I avoid admitting this was a mistake? And those are 2 completely different questions with 2 very different answers. That miscalculation is about to get even more literal. The fourth bias is the reason your fear rarely matches actual risk, the availability heuristic. Your brain estimates how likely something is based on how easily examples come to mind, not on the actual odds. You watch a news segment on a plane crash, and for weeks after, your hands grip the armrest on takeoff, even though you drove to the airport through far more dangerous conditions without a second thought. Vivid, emotional, recent information hijacks your sense of probability, and it doesn't just affect fear. It affects who you trust, what you think is common, and what you assume everyone believes based on nothing more than what happened to cross your feed this week. And this shortcut doesn't stop at fear. It quietly rewires how you handle everything you stand to lose. The fifth bias is one of the most powerful forces in your entire decision-making system: loss aversion. Losing something tends to hurt far more psychologically than gaining the equivalent amount feels good, which means you will make irrational choices just to avoid a loss that gaining the same thing would never have motivated you to pursue. Picture this. You're holding a stock that's dropped sharply, and instead of selling, you hold on, waiting for it to come back. Even though if you were handed that same amount of cash today, you'd never choose to buy that same stock again. That's not strategy. That's your brain protecting you from the feeling of loss, not from the actual outcome. And this bias doesn't stay in your bank account. It follows you into relationships you're afraid to leave and jobs you're afraid to quit, because walking away registers as a loss right now, while staying only costs you slowly, one quiet day at a time. But losing isn't the only thing your brain distorts in seconds. It also decides, almost instantly, who deserves your trust. The sixth bias is quieter, and it shapes who you trust before they've said a single meaningful word, the halo effect. One positive trait, attractiveness, confidence, a great smile, bleeds into how you judge everything else about that person. Their competence, their honesty, even their intelligence. You meet someone at a conference who's polished, well-dressed, and speaks with total confidence, and within minutes you've mentally upgraded their expertise, their trustworthiness, maybe even their character, all from a first impression that told you nothing about whether they actually know what they're talking about. This is how confident people get hired over competent ones. It's how charismatic people get away with things careful, quieter people never could. Not because anyone lied to you, but because one bright trait was allowed to color everything standing next to it. And once you've been fooled by one confident voice, the next bias makes sure you won't be the only one. The seventh and final bias is the one that convinces you a crowd is proof, the bandwagon effect. If enough people believe or do something, your brain treats that popularity as evidence of correctness, even when no one in the group has actually verified anything. You walk past two restaurants, one empty, one with a line out the door, and you choose the line, not because you know the food is better, but because everyone else's choice becomes your evidence. Multiply that by social media, where everyone agrees is manufactured by algorithms designed to make consensus feel bigger than it is, and you start to see how entire movements, trends, and false certainties spread, not through truth, but through the appearance of it. Here's what ties all seven of these together, and it's bigger than any single bad decision you've made. None of these biases are flaws. They're shortcuts your brain built over a very long evolutionary history to make fast survival decisions in a world with far less information and far higher stakes for hesitation. The problem is that you're not living in that world anymore. You're living in one with infinite information, infinite choices, and infinite chances for those old shortcuts to misfire. Your brain isn't broken. It's just running software built for a world that no longer exists. And the people who understand these patterns, marketers, negotiators, manipulators, aren't smarter than you. They've just learned which shortcut to trigger and when, while you're still assuming every decision you make is a fresh, independent one, uninfluenced by anything but your own reasoning. So here's one question worth asking before your next real decision, whatever it is. If you were seeing this for the first time right now, with no history attached to it, would you still choose this? That single question strips away the anchor, the sunk cost, the crowd, the halo, and leaves you with something closer to what you actually think, rather than what your history and your circumstances are quietly nudging you toward. Because the truth is, you didn't choose your last decision, not entirely, but your next one. That one you actually get to catch in the act. So tell me, which one of these seven did you recognize in yourself before I even finished explaining it? Because that one is usually the one running the show. If this pulled back a curtain you didn't expect, there's a lot more hiding in plain sight. I'll see you in the next one.